Okay. And there we go. We're starting to see some folks come in. Welcome to those joining. We'll give a minute here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call Committee of the Whole to order for today, Wednesday, December 2nd. Megan or Kara, I'm already forgetting. If you could put up the slide for virtual, thank you. So we continue to meet virtually. There's a link on the screen about how to join the Zoom webinar. They're also listed at the top of our agendas. For public comment, you can raise your hand virtually. If you're on a computer, you can click the participants button and there's a raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. If you're joining us by phone, you can use *9 to raise and lower your hand. And you can also press *6 to unmute yourself. And our first item is roll. And Megan, do you mind calling roll?
At all. Anderson?
I think Stacy is not able to join us this afternoon.
Okay. Becerra?
Present.
Contos?
Here.
Harp?
Present.
Hess?
Present.
Jones?
Present.
Merritt?
Here.
Ramos?
Jesse indicated you would not be able to join us.
Okay. Cheryl?
Present.
Basika?
Present.
Von Lossberg?
Yeah, I'm here.
West.
Here.
Thank you.
Thanks. We have two sets of minutes to approve, October 21st and November 18th. Any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. We'll take public comment on non-agenda items today. We have one agenda item for the afternoon, and but if there's anybody in the audience that would like to make public comment on non-agenda items, this is an opportunity to do so. And I'm not seeing anyone for that. So we will move to our one agenda item. And I would like to give an opportunity to the council sponsors of the referral, Julie and Heidi. Would either of you like to make any introductory comments? And if not, go ahead.
Oh, sure. Thanks. I'm glad to be getting a presentation on this topic. That, as I understand it, the Invest Health has done some studies about the displacement risk ratio in our community, and I think it's a very important topic for the City Council to hear and to help us just try and formulate some ideas of what to do to address it. Thanks.
Thanks. Heidi, anything?
Yeah, I guess I'll add that I think we're at a really pivotal point in time with implementing, for example, our housing trust fund and setting up the committee. And I think that all of this information will help us make decisions that are more effective. So I look forward to seeing this presentation. Thanks.
Great, thank you. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Kaya and Laval, who I understand will kick us off, and we'll move on from there.
Great, and thank you very much. Sam, do you want to weigh in on making sure we get our other presenters let into the room? I see some of them in the attendee list.
Yep. Let's see, Ethan is a panelist, and so is Tay, Tina.
Yeah, I'm working on this as you mentioned it.
And I don't see Natalie on here, but Natalie, if you're here, if you could press the raise hand button. And if not, Natalie might be arriving in the meantime, but Natalie Stockman for whenever they appear.
Great.
Got it.
Brian, I upgraded the Tay.
Oh, okay, thanks. I think I accidentally promoted Susan A. Patrick because my cursor was over her. So Susan, I'm gonna put you back as an attendee. All right, and we can check in again when we get to that point, and promoting someone is easy to do.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having us today. My name is Kaya Peterson. I'm the Executive Director of NeighborWorks Montana. I'm also a member of the Invest Health team, and I am joining you from my home in the Franklin to Fort neighborhood. So many of you have heard from the Invest Health team at times over the last few years. One of the things our team is really focused on is understanding the underlying data around what's happening in our community in regards to resident health, and in particular, the social determinants of health, of which housing is one really critical area, as you're all well aware. So this displacement risk ratio is one way to understand some of the housing pressure community members are facing. And we were glad we were able to get the reinvestment fund to do this research on our behalf. So I will say that the data is really startling, even for all of you and all of us who are seeing the day-to-day impacts of housing pressure in our community. The data is startling. And the first time the Invest Health team presented this publicly, we really focused primarily on the data. We think the data is very important. But we realized that presenting this data outside of the context of what people's experience is day to day on the ground, and outside of the context of what can we as a local community do to respond, really fell flat. It felt just very despairing. And so I think today what we wanted to do was share the data with you, but also have some ground that in really what's happening for residents with some resident stories, and then have Carissa from the Missoula Home Coalition share some perspective on how this connects to existing and future policy. So as I said, we really hope that the numbers, the stories, the recommendations we're sharing today will be a call to urgency to accelerate the efforts already underway and to do more to address the housing needs of Missoulians and ensure Missoula is a place that supports opportunity for all our residents. Next slide, Lavelle. So this is who is part of the presentation today. And I think the most important thing we want to highlight is there's a growing shared focus on housing, a growing shared sense of urgency, and a growing desire to work together to find solutions. So the presentation and the that we're doing today is really a collaborative effort, and is the not the culmination, but just another step along the road of all of us finding where do we have shared interest. And I would like to highlight too, in addition to a shared interest around making sure that we're using good data and that we're building on hearing what's happening in our community. I think all of the organizations represented here have a shared interest in ensuring that the development and policies we move forward are equitable and address the needs and create opportunity for all Missoulians, as I've said. And also, we have a shared interest in making sure that the voices and perspective of the people who are most impacted are at the fore and are part of, are really driving decision-making and driving solutions. So I think that we're ready to dive into the data. I just, again, would like to encourage everyone as you hear these numbers, as we go through some of what can be very technical and very, numbers, quantitative, that we all remember that we're talking about real people who every day are struggling to pay their rent, to maintain stable housing, and to thrive in our community. So let's turn to the data and then we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. This is Lavelle Means with the Community Planning Division for Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. And I've been a part of the Missoula Invest Health team since its inception as well. I'm going to provide you with summary information about the displacement risk ratio analysis from a presentation that was given by the researchers at the Reinvestment Fund and shared with the community in late September. The full presentation is available on the city website by searching Missoula Invest Health. We have all heard a lot about the rising home prices in our community, but what this presentation highlights is what that means to people living here for 10 or 15 or even more years. The research starts with describing what is meant by involuntary displacement, which is households that are forced to leave their homes and neighborhoods due to circumstances beyond their control. Things like rapidly rising taxes, insurance, rent increases, or conversions of rental property into owner-occupied stock. The general approach for this analysis is to identify places where households with a similar economic profile as those that lived in the area in years past can now no longer afford to do so. So what is the displacement risk ratio and how is it calculated? The displacement risk ratio, or DRR, is a measure of residential displacement pressure that examines the ratio between median sale prices over time and median household income at a fixed point in time. In this case, we use 2000. To identify places where the economic profile of households that can afford to live in an area has changed. For each census block group, the researchers took the median home sale price over a 2-year period and divided that by the median household income in 2000. Then they removed the countywide average to be able to look at places above the trend for high likelihood of displacement. And that's what this ratio calculation is showing you. There are 2 big things to keep in mind. One, median incomes for all block groups are held constant at the 2000-year level and only adjusted for inflation. By holding median incomes constant, the DRR provides a sense of how affordable or not a block group is for people whose incomes are similar to the typical residents who lived there in 2000. And 2, the DRR score that is presented for each block group is always the difference between the score for each individual block group and the countywide average. In this way, the DRR is an internally referenced metric, meaning that every score is relative to the countywide average. So when you see elevated DRR scores in different parts of the city and county, these are elevated in comparison to the countywide average. So this map shows you a look at the changing median home sale prices. This is a supplemental map that shows that percent change in block group median home sale prices from 2010 to 2018. It is one of the factors that was used in that equation I just showed you. Each color on the map, except the less than 25% increase shade, represents substantial price appreciation over this time period. And everything over 50% is pretty staggering. The darker shades represent higher change. So if you can look at the closer in scale of the Missoula city area, you can see where some of the darker block groups are identified around our city and close into the core. Next, I'm highlighting the countywide average DRR over time. This was developed in the same way as the DRR for each block group, but it's for the county overall. The countywide average DRR score has increased from 3.45 in 2010 to 4.53 in 2018 in just 8 years. This represents very rapid housing price appreciation. The research team pointed out that typically when they observe this ratio going above 3.0, they assume residents with incomes similar to those from that base year, in our case 2000, are likely facing increased pressure from rising home sale prices and rents. In Missoula, the countywide average has been 3.45 or higher for the past 10 years, which is startling for such a small place. For some perspective on the countywide DRR, the average countywide DRR in Missoula compared to other cities stands out. The research team pointed out that this is one of the highest DRRs they have seen in a couple of years conducting these analyses. I think I went the wrong way, sorry. So now we look at the block group DRR with the county trend removed, essentially establishing the 0 point on this spectrum. The research team developed a DRR map for each 2-year increment with varying colors of each block group representing the varying values shown here on this spectrum. The high values indicate home values are increasing much faster than incomes, signaling risk of displacement for long-term residents due to housing costs. Values near 0 indicate that the ratio of home prices to income is tracking close to the county average, but let's keep in mind that that already is considered high. Negative values indicate home values in relation to income not keeping pace with the county signaling the potential for displacement due to disinvestment. The presentation and slide deck available on the website shows the entire series of 2-year increments of mapping of a displacement risk ratio. Over time, the research team noted that risk of displacement spread outward from the core to many areas within the city. I'm showing the last 2-year increments in this presentation that was part of that study. And it's worth keeping in mind that every block group where the DRR is at or above 0 is likely facing displacement pressure for residents whose incomes were similar to those of typical residents in 2000. The 0.0 DRR score represents the countywide average, which is already a high level of displacement risk. This mapping is from 2 years ago, so we should also recognize there is more change on top of this indication of displacement risk. And you can see from the mapping there that the higher, darker shades are the higher risk of displacement. Again, above that 3.450 calculation for the county. The research team looked at a number of social and demographic data set factors as a way to think more comprehensively about how the DRR is affecting different groups of the population and different issues related to housing. The factors they studied by block group were percent of non-white population, percent of population 65 years old and older, percent of multi-dwelling units, percent of mobile home units, and percent of workers with low-wage jobs by residents. They overlaid each of those data sets on top of the last 2 years mapping of DRR to show relationships. You can look at that slideshow and the video that's on the Missoula Invest Health website to see the layering. The findings that the research team developed and summarized here are based on all of that information and the overlays from that demographic and social analysis. But in summary, that what they concluded is that between 2010 and 2018, the Missoula housing market experienced substantial appreciation in median home sale prices and number of home sales tripled. Displacement risk ratio shows the city of Missoula overall has high pressure around the University District, Rose Park, Northside, Riverfront, and downtown with elevated risk of involuntary displacement. Many of the populations of interest are concentrated in neighborhoods like River Road, Franklin to Fort, and Westside that are adjacent to areas with high displacement pressure where the pressure may further spread. Many neighborhoods in the city have a substantial mix of single and multifamily housing units, and a majority of Missoula residents earn relatively low wages, less than $3,333 per month. Whoops, I just went too far, sorry. Results of the DRR analysis are that virtually the entire city of Missoula is facing considerable displacement pressure associated with rapidly appreciating home sale prices. The countywide DRR score at 2017 to 18 of 4.35 means the median home sale prices are 4.35 times greater than the median incomes on average. Conventional mortgage lenders tend to make loans up to a 3-to-1 ratio of price to income when borrowers apply for loans. In Missoula, the city is unaffordable on average. Residents at the greatest risk of displacement tend to be households with lower incomes, renter households, and households where individuals live on fixed income. That concludes our summary of the displacement ratio data. I'm going to hand it back to Kaya with lessons learned and a continuation of the presentation.
Thanks, Lavelle. Startling data. I think most people who have seen this and have reacted to it have said, wow, I knew that things were hard in our community for a lot of people, but I didn't realize just the level of potential displacement and the level of impact that we're seeing. And I think we often hear everywhere in the country, people are facing housing issues. These are big issues, they're complex. And while that is true, I think what this data shows us is that what we're experiencing in Missoula is startling even in comparison to what we're seeing nationally. Both the numbers that we saw in comparison to other cities, and the fact that the impacts are citywide. When we asked for this research to be done, part of what we hoped is that we would find some specific targeted places or areas that we could work on to focus our limited resources and to leverage those to the best impact. And I think what we all have seen loud and clear is that's not what we're faced with. We're faced with a community that is really is broadly impacted. The researchers at the Reinvestment Fund said that often if you do have a finding that a certain neighborhood is more impacted, the reaction or the response would be to build more housing in that neighborhood, to build more subsidized housing in that neighborhood, and reduce displacement of affected groups. Those are strategies we still need to be considering, but we also need to recognize that this means that every neighborhood has a role to play in responding to the housing needs that we see. The other thing to point out is the data goes through 2018, and we know that the last 2 years we've seen a continuation and even an acceleration of these trends. So important to keep that in mind also as another layer to the urgency and to the impact we're seeing. So the factors at play in the housing market and in our community are very complex, but that means we should dig in to learn how we can best respond. And while there are many factors outside of our control, there are many factors that are in our control. These numbers and these trends are not inevitable. We do have some opportunity to impact outcomes and, again, to really respond to what people are seeing on the ground. So Carissa is going to talk a bit more about our recommendations around this, but first we really want to turn to a few folks who have been most impacted and who have some stories to share with us today. So the first person who's going to speak is Natalie, and she is in the attendee
She's
list.
in the attendees, yeah. Natalie Stockman, if we could add her.
Megan, are you able to do that?
I think Kara can. Kara's
Or
running
Karen,
the Zoom.
sorry.
That's okay.
Actually, I see Natalie and I'm doing it right now. Natalie Stockman, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I think Natalie, you should be in here and you should be able to unmute yourself.
Great, thanks.
Let me get it better. So yes, hello everybody. Let me get a better angle here. Sorry, the sun is really in my face. Anyway, yes, thank you for like hosting me on the meeting to share my story. I am one of the people in these shaded areas. And my name's Natalie. I've been living in Missoula for 6 years. I wanted to share with you specifically the story about finding a rental, like an apartment, with my roommates during COVID. So I'll just start kind of telling that story. To start, we were looking for a new place based on like poor living conditions and like inadequate housing and just unresponsiveness from our landlord. Like not adequate heat. I lived in a basement, and it just was getting overcrowded with all the also just like during COVID, thinking about spreading out a little bit more. We were looking for like a 3-bedroom apartment. It was like really arduous task to be looking, and took a lot out of me and my roommates. We probably applied to like upwards of 20 places. Some of them, probably 15 of them, never even getting a reply. We looked at 3 houses in our neighborhood with high hopes that we would get those ones. And we definitely did not. Like I was hoping that we were like, we all have stable jobs and like probably the most stable jobs that we've ever had. And so like we were really hopeful that we would get some, and we didn't qualify for any of them, or, for whatever reason didn't get them, which was pretty disappointing, just feeling like trapped. Like you had to come up, like a lot of people were saying that you had to come in with like a cash deposit, which like wasn't realistic for us. We applied to 2 property management places. The application fees were at least $40 each for each person. Just like kind of stacking on these costs while like all of our like income was pretty insecure at that time, during COVID specifically. But it also kind of reflects other moments when I've been looking for housing in Missoula and found it like extremely difficult to find like an adequate, like well-maintained house that is remotely affordable. So I was just kind of getting more frustrated with everything, like looking at Airbnbs on Craigslist that were going for rent almost twice the value of other places, which was really disappointing, and passing like luxury apartments in town that have tons of vacancies that obviously we were not able to afford. Just feeling like not really knowing if we were going to be able to find a place, having all of the like having momentum for all these places and having each one fall through, made it feel like it was less and less realistic that I was going to find like a suitable living situation, and just kind of like exploring immediate options, and the possibility of like not living here had definitely come up, and then also just to say that one of my roommates is from Missoula, her whole family's from here, and she was feeling like especially discouraged, and I was also for her, that there's not a place for her to live here with her family. And we started looking for houses in March and didn't find a place till the end of July. And the only reason that I feel like we got the place was because I happened to be on Craigslist applying and was one of the first 4 people or 5 people to respond to the landlord that I have now. And he told us really flat out that was the only reason, because I happened to be online at that time, which luck should never be the case when people are finding housing. And also like at a time like this, it was like particularly terrifying to not know like what the future holds in that way. Also, just to reiterate that like I'm not the only one. This is not like a unique story. I know of at least 5 of my friends that had a similar transition, and one that was evicted from their house because the landlord wanted to do renovations and they had to find somewhere on the spot. So just to say that like none of these things should be happening, and it felt just particularly discouraging in Missoula, where everybody does love this place and I want to stay, and I work at Free Cycles and just feel like I love being a part of this community, and just to feel like there's not really an option to live here was definitely just discouraging and pretty sad. And So yeah, that's my story, and just a thanks for all of you for listening, and hopefully like considering the urgency with all of these scenarios, because there are people right now who are in this similar situation probably. And yeah, thanks to people on the call for sharing their stories. That's it for me.
Ethan?
Ethan, we need you should be able to unmute yourself.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ethan Sky Siegel, and can you hear me? Yeah. I am representing a small business owner here in Missoula. I've lived in Missoula for 13 years, and this month will be the second time in those 13 years that we would have to move our family because the house is getting sold that we're renting. I have 3 children, 2, 4, and 12 right now. And this story of this year is pretty indicative of many people in this town. Small business owners are also struggling with housing situations right now, and I'm trying to represent them and tell them my story. May of this year, we got offered the house that we were living in, and we were extremely excited. We started putting some money towards a down payment, saving. And we weren't able to, we finally were able to meet that savings and about 3 months later, and pre-qualified for a mortgage. And we were just as ecstatic of the idea of owning a home in the climate right now and having stability for our family. So we revisited the conversation with our landlords in August of 2020, 3 months later, and they had decided not to move forward with the sale. And then 2 weeks, I want to say maybe up to a month later, they did decide to put it back on the market for $175,000 more than they offered us. And it was pretty disheartening, lots of anger, sadness. Our realtor had gotten involved, and now our relationships with our landlord has shifted. It used to be super amicable. We've been here for 2.5 years, and now all communication is through this realtor, and it seems cold. You know, we have a realtor ourselves. We're trying to keep hope that something's out there that we can find, but honestly, looking at the market, it's pretty hopeless. I mean, we're struggling to think that we're going to come on the positive end on this. By the time houses reach the market, it's too late. Realtors from out of state are bringing people in with wages from outside of Montana and salaries that we just don't make here. This is putting us out of the running in contention for this house, and the new owner is stopping by here in an hour to change the guard, and yeah, we don't know who this person is, and we're hopeful that we can find something. In a last desperate attempt, we reached out to friends via text, you know, skipping realtors, hoping that maybe there's someone out there that hasn't listed their home yet, that hasn't worked with the realtor yet, that hasn't that isn't going to buy into this market right now at the prices that they're getting sold for. And fortunately, through the grapevine with this amazing community that I'm so proud to be a part of, we were able to connect with someone, and fingers crossed, you know, we're able to work something out that works best for both of us, and my family can be in a home finally. That we own, and and we don't have to worry about insecurities or changes in relationships with landlords due to who knows what. But the insecurity feeling it can be overwhelming, and has been overwhelming in my tenure here in Missoula. That's my story. Thank you so much for listening. I'm going to pass it on to Tina, who has a strong story as well. So thank you for hearing me out. And I know as a community in Missoula, we can figure this out, but it's urgent, and it's going to take a lot of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Tina, are you able to unmute yourself? There you go.
So can you hear me now?
Okay.
Okay. I want to say thank you all for being here. I'm Tina. I have spent the last 45 years living and working in Missoula. I raised 3 children there, and I was blessed enough to keep them in one home and one school. Last month, I found myself completely shut out of the housing market in Missoula. I tried to find housing, affordable housing, in Frenchtown, Evero, Arlee, Clinton, and the Bitterroot Valley from Lolo to Hamilton. After I was unsuccessful at finding affordable housing, I had to pack up everything that I owned and take my toddler and say goodbye to friends and family in my beloved town of Missoula. I'm sorry. We now live in Great Falls, where we do not know anybody at all. We no longer have our friends, our family, or our community supports. I'm raising my grandbaby, Octavia, who is a 3rd generation, was until last month, the 3rd generation Missoulian. And she's a special needs little girl. She's 21 months old. Octavia Horte, as we call her, was blessed with a wonderful support team in Missoula. She had physical therapist, an orthotist for her leg braces, a pediatric GI doctor, a pediatric neurosurgeon, and over 15 other professionals. After a very rough start in life, Tay was finally making progress. She was no longer deemed a baby who was in a state of failure to thrive. She was finally putting on weight. She was learning to walk, and she had learned to say 3 words. And Early Head Start was absolutely paramount to Tay's success in Missoula. Great Falls hopes at best to get Tay into Early Head Start here in September. This leaves my baby without the supports that she desperately needs for over a year. One of the 3 words that my little girl had learned to say is grandpa, and he was our roommate in Missoula. When he would come home from work, Tay would hear the little bell on the door, and she would crawl as fast as she could to him, and she would say, Dampa, Dampa, and due solely to the rising house costs in Missoula, which I want to say did start before COVID. It has admittedly become worse since COVID, but it definitely started before COVID. But due solely to those rising costs in housing, I had to take Tay for her Dampa. Winter is soon going to be here, and I will be unable to get over Rogers Pass to take her to visit family and friends. This year, we're going to be spending Christmas alone. Tay and I have been on several waiting lists in Missoula for affordable housing for a year and a half now. They hope and project, again, prior to COVID, that our name will come up on one of these waiting lists in 2.5 years. This puts us waiting for affordable housing for 4 years. Meanwhile, we are without our Dampa, and it shouldn't have to be that our plan is to wait for our name to reach the top of a list in order for us to afford to live in my home community, a place where I spent 45 years. I attended Hawthorne School. I graduated from Big Sky. I earned 3 degrees from the University of Montana. I remember when Reserve Street ended at 3rd Street and they built a bridge that went to nowhere. I was in Missoula before Missoula was Missoula. Our family is one of only thousands of people who are facing displacement due solely to the rising cost of housing in Missoula. And we are counting on you, our representatives, to accept the responsibility of taking the action where you can to make this an affordable place for us. And here also to say thank you is 2 of my girls. This is Paris, and this is baby Tay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Just take a second here. A big thank you to Natalie, Ethan, and Tina for sharing your stories. Whew, I'll get it together, I promise. Sadly, like Natalie said, these stories aren't unique. We hear this from people every day experiencing challenges like this in our work on a daily basis. We know that there's an immense need, and we don't have all the answers. Part of this is that we need to come to the table, all of us, together with energy, commitment, and creativity. It's really tricky to shift this conversation from such real and difficult stories to talk about policy and action, but that's my role. I'm Carissa. I'm representing the Missoula Home Coalition. I also work at Homeward, and I live in the Franklin to Fort neighborhood. This displacement risk ratio study illustrates yet another layer of urgency around the issue of housing in Missoula for all of our neighborhoods. As we see this data and hear these stories and witness what is happening in our community, we're all asking the same version of the question, what can we do? This group has come together with some things that we think are most critical and we would like to see a shared commitment to. We want to see more community engagement. We would like to see more tools to do this work and urgency and accountability to get this accomplished. There's a lot of work ahead of us as a community. And in that work, we need to stay committed to ensuring that people who are living these experiences are engaged in defining and implementing the solutions. We want to thank you for the implementation of the Housing Trust Fund. We look forward to the creation of the Citizen Oversight Committee. And one of the areas that we see a need for more commitment to meaningful public engagement is in city land disposition. Given that housing affordability is such a clear shared community need, we want that oversight committee to have a clear voice and decision-making role in future city land disposition. As we look for more tools to do this work, there are a couple of aspects of the housing policy that should be pushed further than was envisioned 2 years ago. I hope it's clear, and I'm sure you all have seen this from your constituents, that the situation has changed since that housing policy was implemented in the last 2 years, and the urgency is even greater than before. We think it's time to revisit inclusionary zoning, and we would like to see the city put funding into a study on what mandatory and incentivized inclusionary zoning approaches could be successful in Missoula. We have a group of Missoula Home Coalition and Common Good Missoula members who are currently having conversations with some national experts on inclusionary zoning. Also, relocation assistance needs more attention and not just for mobile home parks. Lastly, we need urgency and accountability. We need more aggressive timelines to keep up with the pace of change and impact being felt across Missoula. The housing policy approved by council needs to be implemented more quickly and be more responsive to changing needs to both preserve and expand housing options. This takes staff and funding capacity, and more of both should be allocated to make this possible. It is not reasonable to expect the extremely hardworking staff at the Office of Housing and Community Development to meet the necessary aggressive timeline at their current staffing level. As practitioners and Missoulians who are seeing the impact and living day to day with the risk of displacement, we need to see that you share our sense of urgency. People here in this room and in your community, some of who have shared their stories today and others who have not, who deserve to know that their home is secure and their government officials are continuing to step up with them, that you are digging into this work, engaging with the community and creating and implementing more tools, and doing so at a pace that's responsive to the real and growing needs. To understand the very real lived experience of being at risk of displacement or being actively displaced, we need our elected officials to continue to do the work to engage your constituents. In a relationship with the Home Coalition, everyday people pressured by home costs and instability have been researching solutions to the problems they're facing. Like I've said, we don't have all the answers, but we're working and we want to work with you. 10 institutions connected to Common Good Missoula and representing thousands of Missoulians are heading into the community to speak with people who are struggling to have or find a stable home in Missoula. We ask that City Council members commit to working with Common Good Missoula and members of our community to find solutions that prioritize their well-being and security. Everyday people who are represented in this DRR data have to be central to city actions and processes. Common Good will be holding a large gathering on February 23rd, and we encourage City Council members to attend and engage with constituents and community members. We want to thank you for your time. Another thank you to Natalie, Ethan, Tina, and Tay, and Paris for sharing your stories with us and for the data that Kaya and Laval showed. We'd like to invite you to ask questions and share in a discussion on this presentation. Montana James is also here if you have questions for that office as well. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Carissa. Thank you, Kaya. Thank you, Natalie, Tina, and Ethan, and Laval as well. I've got some people queuing up, and I'll go to them first. Julie.
Thanks. Thanks, Laval and Kaya, Carissa, Tina, Ethan, and Natalie for sharing your stories. We definitely, here at City Council, hear constantly since I've been on council, the difficulties that our current housing market creates for people. I do have, and maybe Laval or Kaya, you can answer some questions. A little curiosity more about the actual displacement risk ratio study that was done. I guess first of all, curious of why we're using the year 2000 as the base point for the median income. That seems like a long time ago. And an entire recession and recovery ago. Can one of you speak to that?
Laval, do you want to respond to that, or do you want?
I think, Kaya, if you have, if you could respond to that, that would be great.
Yeah, and we can get more clarity for you on that, Julie. And the presentation that we did publicly previously was done by the Reinvestment Fund researchers, and I believe that they did respond to this, so we can refer back to that. But it is partly because we need a long time period in order to even out those variations, and that what they're looking at is that real wages haven't changed very much in that time. And so the wage piece really isn't the biggest factor here. What we're looking at is change in housing price. And so seeing the impact of that over time is what they found to be most impactful. It also has a little bit to do with access to data. They're trying to use consistent data sets across the cities that they research, and that's part of it as well.
Okay, thank you for that. I thought I had another question as follow-up, but I've lost my place. I'll let you move on to the next person. Thanks.
Okay, Gwen.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone, for the great information today and the stories. And it is something I think that these issues, council is constantly paying attention to them, but I really appreciate getting all of this in front of us on just a regular basis. It's just very important. And I guess the point that I wanted to make, it's not really a question, but the point is, I am hoping there is outreach to the legislators for the upcoming legislative session, because frankly, I think there's so many intertwined issues between local government and state government on these issues. For me, tax reform, so that we could ultimately have more resources to create more capacity to do more, would be great. Tax reform is really hard, but the state of Montana needs to take a hard look at it, because we're butting up against some walls here in Missoula. And then also housing tax credits, I think are completely under the purview of the state, and the board that administrates those would like to have so much more to work with than what they do. That's all at the state level. And we only have a legislative session every 2 years. The other thing I just wanted to communicate was, when I talk to legislators, they do hear from constituents, but not nearly at the level that we as local government do. I think it's very important that they have this in front of them, because a lot of this, frankly, is on their plate. And if they give us the tools, we can do a heck of a lot more at the local level. So I just wanted to, you don't need to answer that now. I just wanted to put that out there, but thank you so much for coming today and sharing all of this.
Thanks, Gwen. And I'm going to jump in on that because, and I appreciate I've got my colleagues in the queue, but I wanted to raise the same sort of issue and ask, and I don't know if it's a question for you, Kaya. I guess two follow-ups to what Gwen brought up. Are you meeting, or are these groups meeting with state legislators about this data? And is that happening?
We don't have a specific forum for this data. I would say there are other avenues where housing policy and state level policy is being discussed, but I think that's a great suggestion and something we could look at.
Okay. I can't underscore that point enough. This is not, it is not a case where like the state has all the solutions and local government doesn't, or we do and they don't. I think we all appreciate, but I will strongly emphasize that the state legislators do not hear about this nearly enough. And this conversation has to be brought to them, as Gwen said. I would also be curious to know if the data that you have from Missoula, do we have that data, or is there any of that data available, the same comparable data for other communities in the state? My thesis would be that we would see very similar sorts of numbers in the major metropolitan areas around the state, but I'm curious if you have any insight into that.
This particular analysis has not been done in any other city in the state that I am aware of. I know there are other similar types of analyses. Also a great question, and something that certainly if we were approaching some state level approaches would be valuable.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was getting at. And I can say follow up on that for further conversations. I'll go back to my colleagues. Heidi, you were next.
Thank you. So I have a couple of questions on the data. So I keep hearing the term wage data versus wage data specifically, and I assume that wage data is different from a usual metric that we use, which is the median income of a county or community. Can somebody address that, just so we have a common language, I suppose?
Not familiar with the difference or a distinction. I don't know if
so
Montana or Kaya might know. Montana? No.
So are we using 2020 wage data, which is, or is it income?
It's median income. It's median income data.
Oh, okay. So it includes like non-wage income.
I think the only wage data that Reinvestment Fund used in this analysis was to pull a data set from the Department of Labor to identify, to kind of gauge where Missoula's wages are. So in the slideshow, we had that number of $3,333 a month. That's the only indicator that comes from Department of Labor data.
Okay, thank you. And then I had a question about the home sales tripling over the period of time that we looked, so 2010, I think it was, to now. Is that an indicator just of like people being like, I guess, is there a way of looking at what is greenfield, new construction versus it doesn't matter, I guess?
Yeah, my understanding is it doesn't matter. What they're just trying to show is that the volume is there. It's not that nothing is selling, right? It's just that as things are selling, displacement is a real concern.
Okay. And then I have a question. Do we have an idea as a city how often displacement is actually linked to a building permit, for example? Because I know we see displacement occurring on, individual projects when we're looking at zoning, rezoning, for example, but that is a fraction of the development that's happening in our community. So do we have a way of tracking when a redevelopment is impacting residents?
Montana, is that anything you can take a stab at, or not sure who best to answer?
I was going to ask Lavelle that question. I know we've had conversations about how we might be able to track that, but I don't know where we are on that.
I think we're working on that. It's information inside of Acela, the permit tracking mechanisms. And right now it's more wordy than you would want, and we're trying to get that down to very sort of specific numbers. So you can say this is a permit that had 1 unit in it and now it has more, and be able to track net differences, things like that, and maybe more tracking around demolition as well. So it's something that we want to look at and clean up and improve on.
Yeah, okay. And then I just have like a more general question, because I was, I guess I would love to see a better understanding of like state law parameters and where local governments are actually capable of, taking action. For example, could a local government even intervene in a private transaction between two private individuals, like in Ethan's, really awful experience where, someone's getting the house sold out from under them, which is happening a lot right now. But I would like to understand better, I guess, whether there is even any like mechanism that could be used.
Yeah, so Heidi, I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna, I think there's gonna be a list of things that come out of this that we're gonna ask staff and partners in the community to help us with. The issue you posed around powers under state law and opportunities that maybe those things identify is one of them. But I'm gonna move us on. We're
my last one.
Quickly running out of time. Heather.
Thanks. What we face here is definitely not unique to Missoula. In my role as executive director for Habitat, I had a conversation with my peer director down in Ravalli, and or as Julie would caution me, up in Ravalli. So, and it's the same thing that's happening in that neighborhood. Folks there have to drive until they qualify, and I think Tina kind of spoke to that, having to move into another county in order to be able to actually find housing that she can afford. And it's happening throughout the state. The state representatives do not necessarily understand truly this conundrum that we are all facing. And very importantly, we have an eviction tsunami that is going to be coming into effect at the end of the year, when the federal moratorium on evictions will be lifted, which translates to 1 in 3 people who are renting who are likely to be displaced. So when we think about the ramifications of that, now you have more people on the streets, which means that you need more police, you need more first responders, you need greater level care of mental health. So it ends up causing even a greater imposition on taxpayers, if you will, because now there are fewer that are actually being able to pay those taxes. And we have to be very, very thoughtful in how we address this. So Montana in particular, when we, based on what we're talking about today, do you have plans about how you're going to address relocation assistance and inclusionary zoning? What's the plan?
Yeah. So relocation is an issue that we speak to in the housing policy, and that has been our work plan. And that's another reason why we've really focused in the last few months on getting the Citizen Oversight Committee seated and kind of getting those scaffolding pieces for the trust fund operational. So all of our programming pieces have to come from the trust fund. All of these programs require financial resources in order to operate. So Emily Harris Shears, our Affordable Housing Trust Fund Administrator, joined our team at the end of October and has really hit the ground running, focusing on appointing or getting the process moving for the oversight committee moving first, because we want to be really thoughtful and intentional about bringing in that community voice and that collaboration piece in order to move forward on those next steps for the trust fund and then the eventual programming that will come from it.
And just a follow up, are you going to be willing to listen to some other ideas in terms of perhaps some zoning changes that would actually allow some additional ways that we can be creative in solving our affordability issue?
Yeah. I mean, so the housing policy lists several land use changes that were recommended through the development of that process. And so I think our collaboration, our connection with community planning, and our new, under this new umbrella of community planning, development, and innovation really adds momentum to those regulatory changes that are recommended in the housing policy. So we're eager to get that work moving, start to kind of get the functional work group up and running to focus on those pieces.
Perfect. I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Thanks, folks. I'm going to run us to about 3:15. We technically were scheduled to 3, and staff and folks have other commitments. I'm going to skip the commitment I have. Next up, I've got Mirta. I just wanted to set expectations around that.
Thanks, Brian. I'll be brief. I just wanted to say, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your stories. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a real issue, one that has moved a lot of us to run for city council, be on council. So there's no doubt in my mind that this is a top priority for us on council, and we'll do what we can and work with all of you to find the solution. A question that I had for staff is there a breakdown of the data that you're collecting so that we better understand who is more at risk of being displaced? And the reason I ask is because I think it'd be important to know if it's, families or the elderly, so that we can encourage development that best addresses that portion of the community. Thanks.
Sorry, Mirta, I was canceling my other appointment.
Just wondering if the data will show more specifics, like who is more at risk of being displaced? Is it the elderly? Is it families? Just so that we know what kind of development we should encourage or to look forward so that we can address that portion of the population.
Kaya Laval, do you want to respond?
Sorry, thanks, Brian. I wasn't sure if that was directed at Montana. I can just say that the full presentation does have some overlays of specific groups, and Laval called some of those out. So income level, housing type, race, age, and really what the risk ratio shows is that all of those are groups who would be impacted. It does have some more granular data around particular Block groups that have higher portions of those particular people. And so I think if you're interested in that full presentation gives you some more layers to work with. In my mind, then the question is, okay, are the tools we're going to develop targeted to those groups, or not necessarily, knowing that the needs are broad? But I think asking both questions and approaching it from both directions in terms of what's the local role that can impact that is really important. So if you need help getting that data, just let us know.
And I would just add that it also shows the relational aspects of it to our places, our Block groups, our neighborhoods, and so you can look at it from sort of an area perspective, as well as the unique special demographics of our community as well.
Thanks. Amber?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks everyone for coming today, and I really appreciate hearing people's stories. You know, we are, I think the entire council is well aware of the issue of rising home prices and wages not keeping up with that. But to see the data and also just to really hear a story in a face put to that's really powerful. You know, I do think our community cares about this issue, having campaigned and talked about it a lot last year. I think it is, at least in my ward, is widespread and something that people are thinking about. My question really, or comment, I guess, was more along the same lines of what Brian brought up was, you know, whether there's data from other communities and whether there are coalitions like this in other communities, because what Gwen brought up, you know, really resonates with me and is really accurate in the, it's important to do this work on a local level, but it's really, really critical to do it on a statewide level. So I don't know, I don't have a comment beyond that, and that I think, you know, it would be really powerful if you were able to connect or get data in those other communities, because, you know, at the state level, Missoulians are kind of Missoulians. And so I think having more data would be, and more communities involved would be really impactful. Thank you for coming.
I like the way you put Missoulians in quotes, Amber, in air quotes. And I will quickly add, part of my emphasis on the statewide is that there are a number of issues, but there's statewide tax policy that encourages the kind of property speculation that is contributing to prices here, and I would assume is contributing to appreciation, incredible appreciation of property values across the state. And that's just one of the reasons I was bringing that up. Sam, I see your hand up, and then I'll see if we can get to maybe some public comment.
Kaya, did you want to speak? I saw you unmute yourself.
You go.
Okay. Yeah, I was just wanted to say that we are doing the most we can. You know, the Home Coalition has members that do operate at a state level, and Common Good is like growing every day to operate at a state level. But I hope also, you know, we know that it's going to take a partnership of everyday people volunteering time out of their days to do what they can to not be displaced from this community. That's the hours spent. That's where it's coming from. It's going to take everyday folks, you know, folks who work in housing agencies in the Home Coalition and the city. And there are things we don't have the power to do, that you don't have the power to do, but there are things that you do have the power to do. And I think that what we're here asking, you know, the folks who are putting on this presentation today, what we're asking you to do is work with us on those state things, but also think about the things you do have power to change, because it is people's ability to live here. It's my ability to live here or not, truly. And I also, on that note, wanted to say that we are doing the most we can do. And in that vein, we're meeting with two folks who do consultations with cities across the country who are farther down the line than we are, who've ended up in the place that we don't want to be. And Montana, I just wanted to actually extend an invitation. We're meeting with an inclusionary zoning expert this week and another one next week, in hopes that they will be invited to come here and look into not only inclusionary zoning, but what else can we do? So I just wanted to invite you or whoever has time from Housing and Community Development to join us. We would love to be doing this work with you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. You actually reminded me of my other question, which was someone had mentioned the work with the national folks, and I was going to ask if it was involving our staff in Montana's in the office there. So thank you. I will try to take a couple public comments here, and I see Josh with your hand up. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Josh Decker. I'm a resident of Ward 1 and a member of the Common Good Missoula's Housing Research Action Team that's been working on these issues. I'm really saddened by the immediate knee-jerk propensity to pass the buck to the state level. We can't do that. We can't continue to do that. We have to take personal responsibility as a community. The way the election just turned out in November, I don't exactly know which state legislatures were supposed to go talk to talk about the kind of tax reform that we need. They're going to be talking about tax reform at the state level, but it's going to be moving in the exact opposite direction of what we need. And to pass the buck in that way is irresponsible. The Housing Research Action Team is made up of dedicated professionals that do this work day in and day out, and also dedicated community members that are volunteering huge amounts of time to address these issues. It's a combination, and I encourage you to take these recommendations and do as much as you possibly can with them, please. And thank you to the folks that told their stories. I'm sure many of council knows Ethan personally, as he operates a business that helps to feed you when you are in your functionary workspace downtown, right at the bus station. So, you know, please avoid the propensity to pass the buck. Do what you possibly can. Thank you.
Leticia Romero.
Hi, my name is Leticia Romero. I live in Ward 4. Wow, this has been a really intense hour. Listening, see, even my dog agrees. Listening to the stories of loved community members and feeling their stories, having compassion and understanding, and being in tears with them as well. And the most response that every city council member has mostly given, with the exception of Julie Merritt, because I really like her, is like passing responsibility to others. Instead of just saying, yes, I will get on this right away, because I know that Common Good Missoula and others, like Josh said, professionals who spend many times, many hours on this, they have all the data. You know, you don't need to ask any more questions about the data. It's there. Call them later. Just say, yes, we will work on this ASAP. People are being left out in the streets. Women and men and everybody, people can't even live here. They've lived here for long enough, and then they're being kicked out because of corporate and money and big profits. And the most, I just get this reaction of just dead stone, pan look, face, nothing else. This is maddening. This is really maddening. It makes me really upset. Instead of just saying, yes, we will get on this. That's it, sorry.
Last person I have in the queue for public comment is Benny. You should be able to unmute.
Hello, my name is Benny Lacayo. I reside in Ward 3. I'm also a member of Common Good Missoula, and welcome back. I just want to, I guess, just ditto everything that was just said by the other folks, and also add, and for sure time, I'll just add, I think it's important too that the city council, we need to not just project power over the city, but power with, and not just, you know, say, hey, we're the city council, you need to listen to us. You elected us as officials and we know what's best. You know, we elected you to be our voice. And I ask that you be our voice now. You hear the people that spoke today. There's people in crisis right now in our city, and we can't pass the buck. We need to figure this out together, and not power over, but power with. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Benny. We're at our conclusion. of the extended time. I want to just quickly say that my comments around working with other communities around the state is in absolutely no way, shape, or form any attempt to pass the buck. And I'm going to leave it at that. I want to thank Kaya, Val, Carissa, Natalie, Ethan, Sam, I apologize, Tina, for sharing the stories. There's a lot of work to do. We're committed to doing the work. So thank you, everybody. And I apologize, I need to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.